So in this video I'm going to show you how to finish the neckline of the sleeve sample using bias tape. So I cut a piece of bias tape into it's 1.25 inches wide, and I folded it in half and I pressed it, and then I'm going to attach it to the neckline and to be able to clean up this neckline using the bias tape. So I folded again the bias tape in half, and I am aligning edge to edge, and I'll leave a little bit out, like 1/4 inch or so, and then I will proceed to pinning the folded piece of bias tape to the right side of the neckline. Again, the good thing about the bias tape, it does conform to the shape of the neck, so it's a good use of bias to clean up curved edges like necklines and armholes. And you will use the same technique to be able to do the same thing. All right, so I'm pinning. So I pinned the folded bias tape all around the neckline, and I will take it to the machine to attach it at 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge. Next, I am going to attach the bias tape to the neckline, and I will be at 1/4 inch away from the edge of both of the bias tape and the neckline. So I'll start stitching, and then I'll back stitch, and then I will remove my pins as I go, aligning the folded bias tape, the raw edge of the folded bias tape with the raw edge of the garment neckline. When I come to the shoulder, I'll make sure that my shoulder seam is flat underneath the needle, and I'll align my edges and keep going. Once I get to the end, I will backstitch again. And so this is the first attachment step. So I stitched the bias tape from the beginning to the end of the neckline seam at 1/4 inch. All right, and I will trim my thread. The next step is I will be trimming the seam allowance a little bit, and I will also snip the seam allowance. So I need to snip the seam allowance, and that will allow for a better folding So I will snip every quarter of an inch or so, or half an inch. Okay, and also I will trim the seam allowance to about 1/8 of an inch or so. So I will shave about 1/8 of an inch from the seam allowance, and I will also snip the seam allowance every half an inch or so. So I trimmed and snipped the seam allowance, and what I'm going to do right now is I am going to understitch the bias tape. So I'll go to the sewing machine and I will be stitching at a 1/16 of an inch from the edge, number 2 stitch. So I pulled all the seam allowance under the bias tape, and I am stitching right at a 1/16 from the edge. So again, I am understitching the tape, which is stitching the seam allowance to the tape. So I pulled the seam allowance of both the tape and the neckline towards the tape, and I am stitching it from the right side of the garment at a 1/16 of an inch away on the bias tape from the attachment seam. Once I get to the end, I will backstitch. Okay, so here is the understitching. Right, and again it is on stitching the seam allowance to the bias tape. Alright, and that will help me fold the bias tape to the inside of the garment, and once I do that I can either hand stitch the lower edge, or I can also do a machine stitching to fix it in place. So I will start by folding this part in and then fold it back. Okay, so in this case the bias tape is not going to show at all from the right side of the garment, and then I'll take it to the machine. Right, and I wanna stitch it at about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, and I can feel the folded edge of the bias tape, and I'm aligning it with the inside of the toe or the machine foot, and then I am aligning the neckline with the outside of the machine foot, and that's stitching at about 3/8 of an inch or so, and that should catch the folded edge of the bias tape. So on the Juki you can do it at 1/4, and it should actually catch very nicely. And as you can see, I am flattening the fabric, making sure that I don't have any puckers. Okay, and I'm just top stitching from the right side of the garment at about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. You can see the finished part already. and it's catching the lower edge of the bias tape. Again, I am working from the right side of the garment, and I am pushing any fabric out of the way so that I won't create any unnecessary or unneeded puckers or pleats or anything like that. Once I come close to the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this end in, right, and then I'll finish my stitching. And once I'm done, I'll backstitch. And done. And as you can see, on the right side of the garment, what you see is only the top stitching, and on the wrong side of the garment, the bias tape is cleaning up the neckline on the inside, and it is fixed in place by the top stitching that I did from the front. And working from the right side of the garment will allow you to create a perfectly parallel stitching line, and it will look good. An alternative to that is to hand stitch it as either a blind stitch or slip stitch for the folded edge of the bias tape. So this is the machine way, and you can also do it by hand. And that takes care of this neckline, and showing you how to bias face a neckline to clean up the neckline edge. And here is the sample done.